Good afternoon and welcome to episode 45 of the Jacksonian. I'm yours truly, Jackson Johnson, and I have with me is the editor of Pack Pride from 247 Sports himself, Cory Smith, as we'll be going over our take on what's going on with the 2024 North Carolina State football team. We look back at the magnificent Cinderella run of the North Carolina State men's basketball team, especially from DJ Burns. And we'll be going over as to whether 2024 is the year whether North Carolina State can end the conference title drought. And let me tell you something, folks, it's going to be a wild ride. How you doing today, Cory?
Doing all right, man. Doing well. It has been a year to remember for NC State, and you know it's mostly been in the 2024 portion of it. So we'll see if that year of the as people are calling it the year of the pack continues.
Well, it could continue, and it's going to get better from there for sure. Um, Before we start off show, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the editor of Pack Pride, the 24/7 Sports branch of NC State. So I've taken over. This will be my 8th season that I've been with Pack Pride and covering NC State specifically. Graduated from NC State. I've covered NC State ever since I left. So this has been natural for me. But yeah, so I write about football, basketball, baseball, and then I cover basketball recruiting as well, along with editing and everything else that goes along with the site and podcasting, things like that. So it's a busy job, but I love it.
Well, it's pretty awesome for sure. But speaking of something awesome, it didn't look very awesome going into the ACC tournament for North Carolina State. They're not even in the bubble watch, but then they magically are making magic 5 games in 5 days. What was going through your mind through the ACC tournament?
Yeah, I mean, we were up in DC during all of that, and watching that run was it was crazy. To be honest with you, I don't think there's any other word really to describe it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other synonyms of crazy that you could use, but it was just it was one of those things where, I mean, genuinely going into it, you thought, okay, there's next to zero chance that they're going to really make a run here. The team finished the season losing the last four straight. They had beaten Louisville earlier in the season, and Louisville was tremendously down. So I was like, all right, they just need to beat Louisville, and then maybe if they beat Syracuse, who they had gotten swept by in the regular season, maybe they're able to make a run here or do something. And I don't think anybody expected, after finding out DJ Horn was not going to be available for the first game, it was like, all right, I don't even know if this team is going to beat Louisville. And they were down at the half against Louisville, and then they make that run. I feel like it was around the UVA game, that shot by by Michael O'Connell there at the very end to push things to overtime, where you kind of felt like, all right, this team is really in this thing. And they beat Duke, they beat UNC along the way. It was just it's something that really can't put into words unless you are an NC State fan, unless you've seen. We're talking about trying to end the conference title drought for football, which goes back to '79. Like, NC State in the two major sports had not won a conference title since 1987. It had been that long since NC State had won the ACC in either one of those major sports. They had done it in baseball back in the early 90s. They'd done it 3 times in the last 5 years of women's basketball. So, it's been done. But in those two sports, it hadn't been done, and it honestly felt like it might never happen before the ACC just implodes, which I guess is kind of what people think is going to happen now. So seeing that run it was nothing short of miraculous, but at the same time, it was one of those things where it's like you really didn't know if you were ever going to be a part of something like that too.
Yeah, and it carried on over to March Madness, which I gotta admit, it was awesome seeing North Carolina State in the Final Four drought this season, because that was pretty cool right there. I may not be an NC State fan, but still, that's a 30 for 30 reboot right there.
Yeah, I mean, that whole run deserved one. It's funny because I remember walking in, the first day after, they're going to the round of 64. It's the first round, and I remember talking to some of the guys, and they're all wearing Adidas had just sent them like brand new shoes, and they were like neon orange and had like a reddish tint at the end of them and stuff like that. And I was like, those look like the shoes of the Final Four. And DJ Horn looked up immediately and was like, yeah, we plan on wearing them there. We plan on wearing them, in Phoenix. And there was just this sense of, just known, like, we're going to do this. It's going to happen from that team, from the very beginning, right after everything happened with the ACC championship and getting to that point. And so, yeah, there was just a not so quiet confidence about this team. Like, all right, if we can do this, we can get there. And, it did. Obviously, you'd like to have been able to beat Purdue. And I still think if you go back to that, a healthy Michael O'Connell maybe changes that game. But just seeing that team be able to go through that run was something, like I said before. I mean, same way as the ACC championship. You never thought as a media member covering NC State that you were going to be able to cover that because it hadn't happened. None of that had happened in over 3 decades.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned NC State playing Purdue because that's going to be a rematch in the Rady Children's Invitational. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, it's funny because it's a matchup of two completely different teams. Because Purdue, while they do have some players back, obviously losing Zach Edey, it looks like a completely different team for them, but they have plenty of talent coming back. For NC State, they've retooled in the portal. For Purdue, they're probably going, well, thank God we don't have to face DJ Burns. You don't have to face DJ Horn. You don't have to face Casey Morcell. But, NC State still has Michael O'Connell coming back. They have Jaden Taylor, Ben Middlebrooks, two guys that contributed during that. And then they get Mike James. They get Marcus Hill, Dontrez Styles, Brandon Huntley Hatfield, all through the transfer portal. Those were all four-star players, according to 24/7 Sports in the transfer portal. Brandon Huntley Hatfield seen as a top 50 guy out of the transfer portal. And then I feel like the biggest addition that they got out of all that, and it's somebody that hasn't been as highly talked about, was Marcus Hill, who was an elite scorer for Bowling Green last year. He scored over 20 points per game. He comes NC State. He's a little bit more of a driver type player that they haven't had. But for when you look at Purdue, they get back they lose Lance Jones and Mason Gillis as well from that team. But they get Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer back, and then Trey Kaufman-Renn will take over that center spot for them. So they do have plenty of talent from that standpoint. So it's going to be a very interesting game. We call it a Final Four rematch, but it's two completely different teams heading into that one, outside of the head coaches and maybe a few guard players that were really big contributors for those teams.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a revenge matchup that I'm looking forward to going into the 2024-2025 college basketball season.
Yeah, that's again, like I said, it's revenge for NC State, but it is a top 15 Purdue team, an NC State team that everybody's kind of doubting again. They're seen as a top maybe 30 or 50 or 40 team. I think it's John Rothstein comes out with his Rothstein 45, and he has NC State like number 40 or 41 right now. But I think this team is more talented than what some people are kind of projecting right now, and I think a lot of that has to do with, oh, well, they don't have DJ Burns, they don't have DJ Horn, they're just not a good team anymore. They've really retooled through the transfer portal.
Well, speaking of heroes for North Carolina State, I know that the football team is hoping that Grayson McCall can be that next hero. I mean, the works that he's done at Coastal Carolina was tremendous. I wonder if that can carry on over to North Carolina State, because I've got a feeling it can.
Yeah, the biggest thing for Grayson McCall is not only does he come over and have a chance to, immediately jump into the ACC and have a chance to really compete there, but at the same time, he's somebody that's thrown for over 10,000 yards, won Sun Belt Player of the Year 3 times in his career. Clearly, he's talented enough to be able to compete at that level. The biggest thing was making sure that they had the players around him, and that's kind of what convinced him to come to NC State was, hey, we're going to try to get a guy like Jordan Waters. We're going to go out and get a Noah Rogers. We're going to grab, Wesley Grimes out of the transfer portal. And then, the cherry on top of all this was getting Justin Jolie, a guy who was a top 3 tight end in the transfer portal this past year. 6'3", big body tight end, a guy that can catch the ball not only in the end zone, but a guy that made 56 catches last year. So he's got a chance to really kind of improve upon those numbers, even though he's not going to be, asked to do nearly as much as he was at UConn last year in Justin Jolie. But he has a chance to come in and really, kind of be a disguise at sometimes. He has a chance to just kind of, all right, hey, we're gonna make this seem like it's a play to Casey Concepcion, who's the biggest name for NC State going into the season, or hey, we're gonna fake a shot over the top to Noah Rogers, and we're gonna hit you, across the middle where you have a linebacker covering, and you just have break free for 15, 20 yards. So there's a lot of different playmakers around Grayson McCall. He's clearly got the confidence. Talking to all the players, he's already got full, leadership over this team. Everybody believes in him, and that's what you want from a quarterback. They're all saying the right things, but once they head into the season, the biggest thing is making sure that you have the playmakers around him for him to succeed, and at the same time having an offensive line that'll keep him upright. And they feel like they have both of those things with 4 returning starters along the offensive line, along with adding Zeke Correll, former Notre Dame center. They add him. He was a top 5 center in the transfer portal as well. They put him in the middle to anchor this offensive line. They've got everything they need around him.
The O-line looks like it's pretty good, but what are the other strengths and weaknesses we need to look out for going into 2024 for the Wolfpack?
Yeah, offensively, the only thing I would say really as a potential weakness would be the depth. You're looking at the offensive line, like I said, you return 4 starters. I don't know that you're necessarily going to see all 4 of those guys along the offensive line. There's kind of a battle for that left guard spot where there might be a guy emerging that's better than what they had at the starter position last year. They have Dawson Jaramillo, Kamen Smith, quite a few guys. Val Erickson is another name to know that transferred from Missouri. So they've got quite a few guys that they feel like can compete for that spot. But the depth behind the offensive line right now, especially at the tackle and center positions, is not exactly what they would like to have going into the season. So they can't afford injuries there. And then, as far as the running backs are concerned, we talk about Jordan Waters, we talk about Kendrick Raphael and Hollywood Smothers. I like all 3 of those guys, and then Jaden Scott too. They've talked up a lot, but it's got to be proven. That's the biggest thing. Is it hasn't been proven for the last 3 years. They haven't had a single running back unit that's finished top 10 or higher in any ACC statistical categories, whether it comes to yards per carry, yards per game, or rushing touchdowns. They haven't finished inside the top 10 in any of those. So they need to be able to kind of put that out on the field. And then on the defensive side of the football, again, it kind of comes down to the depth. You're a little concerned along the defensive line outside of the front 3 that you have. Davin Van, Brandon Cleveland, and Trevally Price, they feel really good about. Red Hibbler's kind of that guy that's, rotational between the right or left end. But behind that defensive tackle and Brandon Cleveland, there's not a lot of known commodities. They went out in the transfer portal and got Chaz Wallace, a guy that came over from Colorado, but he's never started. He's never really competed for a spot. So we'll see, where they feel like they are midway through the season as far as that's concerned. And then linebacker, you obviously lose a guy like Peyton Wilson, who ends up stepping up. It sounds like Sean Brown has been the guy. Caden Fordham has been somebody along the middle of the defense that they feel really good about. And then Kamal Bonner is another name to know. Devon Betty comes back from last year. He was a guy that was a starter, but probably not viewed as a starter going into the season. There's a chance he starts, but Kamal Bonner is kind of the guy that they've targeted as being that starter there. So we'll see the front of this defense, which has been so good for so many years, and they've had so much confidence stopping the run. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them is, are they able to do that again this season? Because they feel really good about the secondary, but that front 6 for NC State has got to be good too.
Well, and we look at the 2024 schedule. Now, it starts off easily, of course, on Thursday night, but then you got Tennessee coming to Bank of America on September 7th, and you got Clemson coming to you got to go to Clemson for September 21st. Now, North Carolina State has beaten Clemson 2 out of the last 3 years. But if they beat Clemson this year, it'll be the first time since 2002 that they've beaten Clemson at Clemson. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean that's one that a lot of people have circled. Obviously, the Tennessee game is one that everyone has circled too, and I've said this for a little while because obviously this schedule has been one of the big reasons why a lot of people have confidence for NC State. Is it's not just, oh hey, they're a good team. It's, oh hey, they're a good team, and outside of those first two games, two of those first four games, the schedule really shapes up pretty easily for them. I mean, Wake Forest at home is going to be a game they should win. Syracuse at home, another game they should win. At Cal is going to be tough because you go across the country. But then you get a week off after that before you play Stanford and Duke, two teams that can be good, but I don't think the expectations are extremely high for them. And then another off week before you face Georgia Tech on the road. You get over a week to prepare for them. And then North Carolina to close the season out, you get over a week to prepare for them. So, each one of these games, the schedule has worked out in their favor that if I think the biggest thing for NC State, and this was something we've talked about, is like how many upsets do you need to be able to put yourself in the conversation for not only the ACC championship game, but also trying to get to the college football playoffs. So I think they need one of those two. You beat Clemson, that puts you in great shape to get to the ACC championship game. But if you beat Tennessee before that, that puts you in a great spot to really and truly compete for a college football playoff spot, even if you don't get to the ACC championship game. Because as much as people love to say this, oh, well, both the teams that make it to the college or the ACC championship game, if they both get there, well, okay, if the only loss for NC State is at Clemson on the road, one of the toughest places to play in the country, and you run the table the rest of the way, and you're 11-1 at the end of the season, and you don't make it to the ACC championship game because, say, two teams go 8-0, or Clemson is the only team to go 7-1 outside of you, I mean, they've still got an outside shot to make the college football playoffs. So all of your goals are attainable if you win one of those two games. If they find a way to somehow or another win both of those games, I mean, we're talking about preseason hype for NC State right now, but the midseason hype, if you find a way to go 4-0 and you have that kind of schedule in front of you, it would be absolutely massive for this program.
It would be huge. And, it looks like the kind of schedule that can get you your first conference title since 1979, a 45-year drought in the Bo Ryan days.
Yeah, it's again, like I said, there's still a lot to be decided. But this is a team that has all the makings of that. I mean, I talked about this the other day. The biggest thing for this team that needs to separate itself from the teams that have missed, the teams that haven't been able to get to that point, is first of all getting off to a great start. You have to be able to go at least 3-1 in that first month. I think win one of those two games, and you got yourself in a great position to truly compete to get to the ACC championship game. Also, the other big factor here is, guys that you're hoping will step up need to step up. And I think that's kind of what's been missing in the past. I compared all this to that 2017 team for NC State, where hype wasn't extremely high around that team. But when you look back on that team, the number of NFL players that were on that team, it was like this team, if they hadn't they played South Carolina, they played Clemson, and they played Notre Dame that year, and they ended up going 9-4. The only loss they had outside of those was against Wake Forest. But if you look back at that team, like you had Bradley Chubb, Justin Jones, B.J. Hill, Jermaine Pratt, Ryan Finley, Kelvin Harmon, Naheem Hines, all guys that went to or are still in the NFL at this point. And A.J. Cole is your punter. You had several guys that were all major factors in the NFL in the future. And they missed that opportunity because of the fact that a lot of those guys were young. A lot of those guys weren't ready to step up. So you need, guys that I've mentioned beforehand. You need a Kendrick Raphael to emerge as your secondary running back. You need Noah Rogers to become a true weapon on the outside to complement Casey Concepcion, Jordan Waters, and Justin Jolie. You needed Dakari Collins to really step up and be that guy on the other side. Wesley Grimes, all these guys that we feel like are maybe a year away from being great to really kind of put themselves on the map this year on the defensive side of the football. Caden Fordham, Brandon Cleveland, those types of guys that are younger, Trevally Price, that are younger, that haven't done it yet, haven't proved themselves yet. If they can do that this year, along with all the veterans and all the transfers that they brought in, there's a real shot that this team can make it to the ACC championship game at the beginning of December. You don't play against Florida State. You don't play against Miami. You don't play against Virginia Tech. You miss all those teams this year. The only true team that has a shot to make the ACC championship game with NC State that they have on their schedule, I'd really say Clemson. I think UNC has a good team, but not a great team. They don't have the makings of being an elite team yet. Georgia Tech is the same way. They have a lot of good players, but they can't really push for that yet. So for NC State, it's winning early and then don't stub your toe late in the season. Have these guys truly emerge and be able to win you games down the stretch to get yourself in that position.
Yeah, don't especially stub your toe against Georgia Tech the week before rivalry week. I mean, I know that there's some weeks where it looks sloppy during the regular season, but anytime there's a sloppy week in college football, that means upsets are coming.
Yep. Yep. And again, I think the one thing that'll give NC State fans confidence is the fact that, yes, it does come right before you play UNC, but it comes after your senior night game against Duke. You get a week and a half basically to prepare for Georgia Tech. And then, like I said, the last game of the year, it's not like you have to look ahead to UNC because you have 8 days to prepare for them. So it's not a game that's played on a Friday like it has been in the past. It's not played on Black Friday the day after. It's played on the Saturday, and you play the previous week on a Thursday. As much as the ACC has, I'm not going to conspiracy theories here like a lot of NC State fans will, but as much as the ACC has screwed over NC State in the past, they really kind of gave NC State a gift. This time it's time to actually unwrap it and get yourself to Charlotte at the end of the season.
Yeah, because I mean, if you get the Charlotte this year with 11-1, you're in the playoffs, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, you would think so, and I think that's the only concern is if you lose and say I don't know, a Miami is lurking there. Miami is 7-1, and the only team that they lost to is Florida State, but NC State got in over them somehow. Clemson is there at 7-1, but NC State beat them and they got in. There's a lot of still dicey scenarios. You love to get to Charlotte and just go ahead and win, especially when you're an NC State fan, NC State that doesn't have, that brand or that name value. Go ahead and just, get to Charlotte, snap that streak, and get yourself guaranteed spot in the college football playoff and achieve every single goal that they have set forward for them this year.
Well, I mean, if NC State does end that drought this year, I wonder if we'll see like a documentary on ACC Network or 30 for 30. That'd be cool.
Yeah, just name it 2024. Like that's, I mean, 2024 the year of the Pac. If they find a way to win, and I will say this: there's a lot of fans. We joke about calling it the year of the Pac, and a lot of fans from other fan bases love to say, "Oh, well, where's the hardware? Where's the championships?" Well, they won an ACC championship, and they've won ACC championships in multiple sports. The big thing is, they haven't been able to finish the job getting into the postseason, but getting into the college football playoff is no joke. It's one of the toughest things still. There may be 12 guaranteed spots, to get in, but nothing is guaranteed. Especially if you're in the ACC or you're in the Big 12, you're not in the, the Big 10 or the SEC, and you're just viewed as this juggernaut somehow or another if you get inside the top 4. For NC State, you have to be able to get yourself in that position. And if they can find a way to do that, yeah, I mean, I think Derek Wittenberg is already probably trying to produce another one because he was the one that did the producing for the 1983 documentary. I wouldn't be surprised if he's already got something in the works and he's just kind of waiting to finalize everything in 2024 and see how this all goes. Side note here, not that everybody's paying attention to each college that players are in when it comes to the Olympics, but currently right now, NC State just won a bronze medal in swimming with Catherine Burkhoff, and also just guaranteed at least a silver from Diana Schneider, who's part of an Olympics, part of a doubles tandem that's competing in the Olympics as well. So there's at least two medals as well from the Olympics, which is the first time a female swimmer has ever won from NC State, and then the first time that I forgot I did that, and then also the first time that a female tennis player has ever won from the ACC or from NC State. So it's a lot going on, but and a lot to keep up with. But man, it's been a really fun year for NC State, and it could get, I guess, even more fun this fall. We'll see.
Oh man, that's pretty funny that the thumbs up came out of nowhere. That was pretty funny. That'll be in the Jacksonian outtakes history books for sure. Love it. Most certainly is. And as we wrap up episode 45 of the Jacksonian, for those who would like to tune in to Pat Pride or tune in, see what you guys say, where can they find you?
Yeah, so if you want to watch our stuff on YouTube, obviously go over to the Pack Pride page. I know that's one thing that I wanted to kind of promote as well, along with everything else that you have there. But on our Instagram and on Facebook and on Twitter, you can just search Pack Pride and you can find us. And then on TikTok, it's Pack Pride 247. Apparently, somebody took Pack Pride from us before we could create one, so I was a little behind the curve there, but. Yeah, do make sure to follow us there. We're trying to build that back up as far as TikTok's concerned. So there's plenty to keep up with, and yeah, it's just right now it's a lot of fun to keep up with NC State, and I hope that you guys will follow us there too.
Well, and you can also tune in to check out, see what Cory Smith has to say on X, Instagram, and Threads, where he also gives his take on the North Carolina State Wolfpack. And of course, there's the 247 sports sites for Pat Pride. And you can also check me out on Jackson Johnson 979, where I'm 147 subs away from magic number 500. And you can also check me out on X, Instagram, and Threads at Jackson09960335 and on Instagram and Threads at Jackson Johnson 543908. Until next time, this is Jackson Johnson from the Jacksonian, wishing you all a happy afternoon and stay safe and stay cool.